The case for a Japan-South Korea alliance. On June 3rd, Lee Jae-myung of South Korea's left-leaning Democratic Party was elected president in a landslide. Many in Tokyo viewed this with trepidation, since Lee has previously shown hostility toward Japan. In 2016, while mayor of the city of Seongnam, Lee described Japan as an enemy state. Lee was also critical of his predecessor Yoon Suk Yeol's enthusiastic cooperation with Japan, lambasting it as humiliation and subservience. Lee and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held their first summit in Canada this week on the sidelines of the G7 meeting. Warm words were exchanged, with Lee saying the two countries have an inseparable relationship like neighbors who share a front yard. As we near Sunday's 60th anniversary of the normalization of ties between the two countries, it is still highly possible, however, that bilateral relations could now start to cool. Therefore, it may seem perverse to advocate a Japan-Republic of Korea, JROK, alliance. Yet, that is precisely what the circumstances require. All the alternatives are much worse. There is no question that the security situation for both Japan and South Korea has deteriorated. Chinese leader Xi Jinping makes no secret of his determination to seize Taiwan, including by force if necessary. North Korea is also increasingly assertive. In 2024, the Pyongyang regime revised the constitution to designate South Korea a hostile state. The North's weapons program has also matured. It now possesses dozens of nuclear warheads, as well as sophisticated delivery systems. Furthermore, Russia, which once opposed North Korea's destabilizing behavior, has become an accomplice. In exchange for millions of artillery shells with which to pound Ukraine, Moscow signed a military pact with Pyongyang promising military and other assistance, with all means at its disposal. Russia has also repaid North Korea with what the New York Times describes as a weapons bonanza, including anti-aircraft missiles and attack drones. Tokyo and Seoul need their alliance with the U.S. more than ever. Yet, the reliable partner of past decades is gone. In its place is a U.S. administration that cares nothing for political principles and is more at home in the company of blood-soaked autocrats than democratic allies. Perhaps Washington's self-destructive behavior will end and a more familiar U.S. will return. However, hope is not a strategy. Japanese and South Korean leaders are aware of the perilous situation and have made some reforms. The changes have been greatest in the case of Japan. They have included the acquisition of missiles with sufficient range to strike enemy bases, a commitment to raise defense spending to 2% of gross domestic product by 2027, and a deepening of security ties with like-minded countries, including the UK and Australia. These steps are welcome, but they are evolutionary when revolution is required. They fall well short of what is needed to maintain Japan and South Korea's freedom from coercion and to reliably deter Beijing and Pyongyang. On the current trajectory, a likely outcome is a gradual Finlandization of Japan and South Korea as China uses its military and economic muscle to force Tokyo and Seoul to bend to its will. A more alarming possibility is that an emboldened Beijing or Pyongyang will assess that U.S. security guarantees are already a dead letter and that the way is clear to forcibly remake the regional order. So serious is the situation that many are looking to the nuclear option. Opinion polls in South Korea consistently show more than 70% supporting the development of indigenous nuclear weapons. Japanese policymakers also discussed the topic, albeit behind closed doors given Japan's painful history with nuclear weapons. One politician who's been unusually frank is Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. In 2011, he argued for retaining commercial reactors since they would allow us to produce a nuclear warhead in a short amount of time. There may come a time when possessing nuclear weapons becomes unavoidable, but any country making a dash for the bomb is vulnerable to preemptive attack. The acquisition of nuclear weapons by South Korea or Japan would also devastate the international arms control regime, potentially causing a cascade of proliferation. It would be unconscionable to reach for weapons of mass destruction when a better option is at hand. No single step could have a more favorable impact on regional security than the forging of a mutual security guarantee between Japan and South Korea. The security of the two countries is already intertwined. Bound together in an alliance, their armed forces would be a formidable adversary. The opportunities for cooperation, including in armed production, would be endless. There are real obstacles to a JROK alliance, not least the need to rework the country's militaries to provide for each other's defense. Such challenges could be overcome if political will existed. The problem is that it does not. This is primarily due to historical issues related to Japan's colonial rule of Korea from 1910 to 1945. The issues of forced labor and comfort women. The euphemism for women forced to work in Japanese military brothels faded from view under the conservative presidency of Yoon. There is a danger that they come roaring back under Lee, a progressive, who has previously argued that military coordination with Japan must be preceded by a reckoning with the past. These are sensitive issues and should be discussed within society. However, the obsession with history displayed by both South Korean progressives and Japanese nationalists is a peacetime luxury that neither country can now afford. For a South Korean government to prioritize crimes committed more than 80 years ago over national security today would be a chronic failure of leadership. Equally, Japanese politicians who antagonize South Korea via visits to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine should realize that, for all their professions of patriotism, they are inadvertently serving the interests of China and North Korea. The relative stability of the post-Cold War era is gone and is not coming back. Radical new thinking is needed. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe once said that discussions about nuclear weapons in Japan should not be taboo. He would have been better to have said the same about a Japan-South Korea alliance.